Hi, Andy XL back with another podcast, and this is my Premier League preview for the season. And in this one, I'm looking at the teams that I think will finish between 6th and 20th in the league in the coming season. I'll list them alphabetically, so let's get started with Aston Villa. Villa had a tremendous 2025-26 season, finishing fourth in the Premier League and thus qualifying for the Champions League, which they in actuality had already done by winning the Europa League. In Premier League terms, though, it should be noted they finished 20 points behind champions Arsenal. Add to that the departure of Yuri Tielemans and Morgan Rogers, plus the serious injury suffered by Amadou Onana at the World Cup, and they look significantly weaker in the midfield and creative areas. How they spend the money they got for Tielemans and Rogers, although they have already spent half of that on Johan Manzambi, who I recently tabbed as one of the emerging stars from the World Cup, and João Gomez from Wolves. They've also brought in Alejandro Garnacho on loan from Chelsea. The fact Garnacho was brought in on loan rather than via transfer shows the financial fair play constraints Villa are working under. Manzambi will need to cover the loss of Rogers, but the centre in midfield without Tielemans and Onana looks a lot weaker than last season, unless they make another significant addition or two in that area. Emi Martinez and Leon Bailey are also the subject of continuing transfer speculation, whilst other Premier League teams are also looking at Ezri Konsa and Lucas Digne has gone to PSG. Villa are certainly not in a position to lose any more of their key players from last season if they are going to reach the levels that they did in the last campaign. Young striker Brian Maggio looks promising but is now injured, and overall Villa look weaker than last season as a squad. Then they will have the Champions League workload to cope with, which will not give them the opportunity to rest starters that they were able to do particularly in the early stages of the Europa League last season. Right now, I would say that the fact that their squad is weaker than last season, added to the Champions League workload, could cost Villa 8 to 10 points from their points haul of last season. That would see them fall to between 7th and 9th in the Premier League next season. So Europa League qualification, a cup run and making the knockout stages of the Champions League would represent a good season for Aston Villa in my opinion. Moving on to Bournemouth. Under Andoni Iraola, Bournemouth had a superb season in 2025-26, finishing 6th on 57 points and qualifying for the Europa League. With Iraola now the Liverpool manager and the additional load of the Europa League to deal with, it will be a major challenge for Bournemouth under new manager Marco Rose to repeat the performance of last season. Having lost Antoine Semenyo towards the end of last season and was sent back Marcos Senesi, having joined Tottenham, the Cherries will need to pull some rabbits out of the hat in terms of additions if they are to finish in the top half next season. Alex Scott has also declined a new contract and is looking for a move away. Ryan is another young player they will do well to hold on to for long. This club has done tremendously well on a small budget to bring in quality players at a low price and sell them on. But this next month could be their biggest challenge in terms of finding replacements for Semenyo, Senesi, Scott, and potentially Ryan. Antonio Silva looks like a pretty good addition to their back four, whilst Alvaro Rodriguez also adds to the options up front. With a small squad in Europa League to cope with, plus the loss of a very good manager, that could be a big loss for them and could cost them in the area of 15 to 18 points from last season, which makes them definitely a bottom half team and possibly even a relegation candidate. Brentford, the Bees had a strong first season under Keith Andrews, finishing ninth with 53 points and only just missing out on European football. They pretty much have the same squad as last season. Jordan Henderson's leadership from midfield will be missed, but Mamadou Sangare could be a quality addition in terms of energy and youth. And they've added some attacking depth with Jaden Anthony and Callum Wilson. So with a settled coaching team and playing staff in place, in theory they should be able to repeat or improve on their performance of last season. Mid 50 points and possible qualification for Europe look like achievable goals for Brentford. Brighton. Brighton just edged Brentford out of the European spots last season on goal difference, so will need to manage their Conference League workload this season. But that's not the toughest competition to be in, so it may not take a major toll given the low level of some of the opposition they will face there. Jean-Paul Van Hecke went to Tottenham for 52 million. Danny Welbeck has gone to Chelsea. Joel Veltman and Adam Webster were released, but the additions of Pascal Struijk, Zadok Johanna, and Luka Vuskovic may well at least go some way to offset those departures. Johanna may be the next young star to emerge via Brighton, whilst Vukovic is a young defender who could also develop nicely. Karu Matoma missed half of the Premier League last term, so if he plays more next season, that could help them improve offensively. Mid 50 points wise, and possibly a bit more, could be the aim for Brighton next season, so an upgrade from the Conference League to Europa League could even be on the cards for the Seagulls. On to Coventry. Recent evidence tells us that the teams to come up from the Championship need to make multiple additions to their squad if they are to survive in the Premier League. Last season, Sunderland and Leeds did that. Burnley did not. And guess which of the three got relegated? You got it, Burnley. And as of now, Coventry have not been highly active in the transfer market. And whilst they won the Championship by a comfortable margin last season, they still got 5 fewer points than Burnley did when they got promoted. They also lack the defensive qualities of any of the three promoted teams from last season. So they did score plenty last season, but as a collective rather than via one or two quality strikers. They do have good players like Jack Redoni, but do they have enough attacking quality to disturb Premier League defences? I doubt it. And I also have more doubt about them defensively. So this looks like it's going to be tough for Coventry to make their stay in the Premier League more than a single season. I'm going to project them for 25 to 27 points, and that would mean relegation. For Crystal Palace, Palace endured a tough season last time around in the Premier League, but did manage to win the Conference League, and in doing so, will be in the Europa League next season. They will have a new manager next season following the departure of Oliver Glasner, and with the added burden of the Europa League, will need to have a better squad to improve on the 45 points they got last season. With Man United plus others sniffing around Jean-Philippe Mateta, Chelsea having taken Maxence Lacroix, and multiple teams looking at Adam Wharton, it looks like they could lose some key personnel from the spine of their team. The swap for Brennan, they swapped Brennan Johnson for Dwight McNeil, excuse me, but that is unlikely to make a significant difference to Palace's prospects. If they do see more of that trio leave, replacing them with similar quality will be tough for Palace. So with the managerial change, Europa League workload and possible departures, this could be a tough season for Palace. I would say each of the three players mentioned in possible departures would be worth 5 to 6 points each a season. So losing two of them would cost Palace, or two or even all three of them would cost Palace between 15 and 18 points. That could put them on about 30 points and see them join Bournemouth and Coventry in the relegation battle. On to Everton. Hayden Hackney has been added to replace Idrissa Gueye, but apart from that, this has been a summer of little change for Everton. Jack Grealish has returned to Manchester City after his loan ended, though. They ended last season in mid-table with 49 points, having faded towards the end of the season. With the same manager and playing staff in his place, why should we expect anything different from Everton next season? Well, Tyler Diblin failed to make an impact, so Everton will need to see more from him next season. But I really like Hackney and think he could be a strong addition in midfield. If they can improve creatively and avoid the bad run they had to the end of last season, where they took just 3 points from their last 7 games, and then a 10 point improvement could be on the cards. But to that end to the season is a big concern, and Everton look like a club like others before them that have a shiny new stadium to pay for, so the purse strings may be pulled tighter when it comes to the playing staff. That could see them into the mid 40 point area and a mid table or lower finish. Fulham finished 11th last season with 52 points, but both their top scorers from last season, Harry Wilson and Raul Jimenez, have departed this summer. So that represents 19 of Fulham's 47 Premier League goals from last season going out of the door. How do they make up for that 40% loss in goal scoring? Well, young striker Gonzalo Garcia is the replacement for Jimenez, and how quickly he settles could be pivotal to how Fulham do this season. Rodrigo Muniz and youngsters Kevin and Jonah Kusiari will be the others asked to do so, but that may be a big ask if Garcia struggles. Fulham have a good defensive midfield, And I like the addition of Shay Charles from Southampton, but that potential lack of goal scorers is a concern ahead of next season if Garcia does not hit the ground running. I see them being just about as good as they were last season because I like Garcia and I think he might be a good signing for him, which should mean a haul of around 50 points. But no player is relying on a new signing for me more than Fulham are relying on Garcia this season. So they need him to play a really good season. Hull Hull will look to do a Sunderland in having come up via the playoffs to be the best of the promoted teams next season, but they have not followed the Sunderland path by making multiple additions to what has the look of a distinctly championship level squad. Indeed, they have lost keeper Ivan Pandora and striker Carl Joseph from last season's squad. Unless they get really busy in the transfer market, this team looks well short of Premier League standards and looks like it will really struggle next season. As it stands, they are absolute certainties for me to get relegated and might even do well to reach 20 points. Ipswich, having put Coventry and Hull right in the relegation for that next season, will the third promoted team, Ipswich, fare any better? While they have the same squad as last season and they have taken a punt on young Brazilian striker Emerson from Toulouse. They have a similar profile to Coventry, but have been here before and may have the quality required to match Coventry in the Premier League when they could not do so in the Championship. They have also got busy in the transfer market with Issa Diop added to solidify the back four, Abdul Fatawu out wide, and Emerson and Dyson Maeda added to their front line. They have added two goalkeepers in the mix too, so they will need one of them to emerge as a quality keeper, and for Diop to bring the experience required to make them harder to score against. Then they need to find the offensive additions to get them the goals they need to survive beyond this season in their Premier League. There may still not be enough to keep them up, but they have given us a chance to do so with the additions they have made. On to Leeds. Leeds came up last season and achieved objective number one by not getting relegated, finished 14th on 47 points. They let Carl Darlow and Elan Meslier left, and that left them looking for a keeper. But James Trafford has arrived to fill that vacancy and upgrade it. Pascal Struijk has departed, being replaced by Tarek Muharremic from Serie A Sassuolo. But is the signing? But it is the signing of Harry Wilson that is an eye-catching move by Leeds this summer, adding to the Welsh contingent in this squad. Wilson had a tremendous season for Fulham last season. If he shows that form for Leeds, he could be a real difference maker as they seek to build on last season. They should do at least as well as they did last season, and with the addition of Trafford and Wilson, 50 plus points in the top half finish could be on the cards for them next season. Newcastle, last season was a poor one for the two. They finished 12th with 49 points, and now an exodus of talent is happening this off-season. Bruno Guimaraes, Sandro Tonali, and Anthony Gordon are all gone, and they've also lost it. They will also be a team under new management following the departure of Eddie Howe. 20-year-old Alaji Bamba and 18-year-old Dutch starlet Sean Stoyer have been added as a central midfield, and Lewis Miley might be asked to take a far bigger role in that area too. Ivorian Bazuma Traimori is another young addition as a potential replacement for Gordon, and Lucas Hornacek and the French under-21 keeper Ewan Zhouan will surely challenge Nick Pope for the starting role there, and they've just added a defender from Benfica as well. Last year's signings Nick Voltemade, Anthony Alanga, and Johan Visser have not delivered what was required on them yet. So if they need to do so, and the new guys plus Miley need to have big seasons if Newcastle are to push themselves back into the top 8 next season. Their starting lineup could have a distinctly young look to it next season, and there are a lot of things that need to go right for them to be a top 8 team in 26-27. Losing Tonali and Guimaraes is a huge blow, so it could be next season is about getting things in place for them to improve beyond next season. Although they will not have European football to worry about next season, and I could see them finishing on around the 50 to 55 point mark, which would give them a chance of a top 8 finish. Nottingham Forest, a season of managerial turmoil and the absence of Chris Wood for much of last season, saw Forest have to fight to stay in the division. They ended it in 16th place with 44 points. And now they've lost Elliot Anderson to Man City, and that's obviously a big blow. But now how they spend the Anderson money will be critical to the hopes of next season, and will as will stability in the dugout. Ibrahim Sangari becomes a key player for them next season following the departure of Anderson, but getting Chris Wood back and firing would be a huge boost for them. Usman Diamande will fortify their back four and make them more solid defensively. As I say, Anderson is a player that leaves a big hole, but Forest may not be as impacted as much by that as other teams with Wood returning. And I can see Forest having a better time of it in 26-27 despite the loss of Anderson. Offsetting the Anderson stroke Wood situations, I actually think Forest may end up around the 50-point mark and a safe mid-table finish, as long as the chairman does not get trigger happy with his manager or managers again. On to Sunderland. Sunderland were in many ways the story of last season. Everybody had them tagged as strugglers to survive, yet they ended up in seventh with 54 points, and will be playing in the Europa League as a result. Their first half of last season was just magnificent, but between the halfway mark and game 36 of the 38 season, they only got 19 points. They won their last two against teams with little or nothing to play for to boost them up from 12th to 7th. Although that poor period was partly down to players missing at AFCON, I would still anticipate a degree of regression this next season. Apart from some squad players leaving, they have kept last team's squad together and have had experienced left back Thomas Meunier to the mix. But opposing teams will be more used to Sunderland's playing style next season and thus be better prepared for it. So I think maybe Sunderland finish with 40 to 45 points, and that might be a reasonable expectancy for the Black Cats in their second season back in the top flight. And that would be enough to get them a third season for sure. So finally on to Tottenham. Tottenham have finished 17th for two seasons in a row with 38 and 41 points respectively. Next season they will not be able to say European football contributed to their poor season, but they have to improve significantly if they are to get into Europe at the end of the 26-27 campaign. The whole thing was a train wreck until Roberto De Zerbi arrived at the end of last season. But will they steam up the table next season? And they're not being shy in the transfer market. Sandro Tonali and Matias Fernandes at a cost of 185 million have been added to bring quality to a midfield that already has plenty of competition for places in it. Jan-Vulpan Hecker for another 52 million comes in at centre-back, with free transfer additions Marcos Senesi and Andy Robertson providing more solidity and depth in defence. Just what do those defensive additions mean for some of the last year's squad, though? Van Hecker and Senesi coming in left room for Christian Romero to be sold. Ben Davis and Kevin Danzo may be surplus to requirements, and Tottenham already had Jed Spence and Destiny and Doggy at left back. So keeping both of them and Robertson looked unlikely, hence why Spence has been sold. Whilst Tonali and Fernandes arrivals bring the Tottenham futures of Conor Gallagher, Archie Gray, Lucas Bogle, Pap Sarr and Rodrigo Betancourt into question. And that is without Paulinho, who they had on loan from Bayern last season, so he's obviously going to go and play somewhere else. And they still lack a top striker as Richarlison topped their Premier League scoring charts with just 11 last season. What you would say is Mohamed Kudus only played in half of the Premier League games last season due to injury. James Maddison missed pretty much the whole season, and Dejan Kulusevski did miss the whole season. So getting those three back with Xavi Simons and Matisse Tel gives them plenty of creative options going forward. But as I say, they still need that focal point to their attack to get finish things off. Once they sift the excess from their squad, and if they get Kudus, Madison, and Kulusevski, an on-form Tottenham have the quality to be a top 6 team next season, and maybe even top 4 if they find a 15 to 20 goal striker from their current squad or bring one in. For a team to go from 17th place finishes to a top 4 or 6 spot requires a 20 to 25 point improvement, and even though the talent is there to do it, pulling all of those moving pieces together is a big ask. But 15 to 20 points could be a more achievable gain. That might be enough for a top six finish, and they have a shot of at least considering they have no European commitments for next season. So to round off, here's how I see the teams finishing from 6th through 20th next season and how many points they'll get. 6th, Tottenham with 58 points. 7th, Aston Villa with 57. 8th, Brighton with 56 points. 9th, Leeds with 54. 10th, Brentford with 53. 11th, Newcastle with 52. 12th, Nottingham Forest with 50. 13th, Fulham with 50. 14th, Everton on 47 points. And then Sunderland are probably the last team I see is pretty much safe, even though some are ranking them to be relegated this season. I think they'll be all right finishing 15th on 41 points. Then we get to the real relegation candidates. But I see Bournemouth as probably having enough to survive. They'll finish 16th on 38 points for me, leaving four teams to battle it out for the three relegation spots. And I have Ipswich just surviving in 17th on 31 points, which would send Crystal Palace down in 18th place with just 1 point less on 30. Coventry finished 19th with 25 points, and I can't see Hull getting off the bottom of the league with their current squad. I see them finishing on 20 points and going down. So that's how I see the bulk of the Premier League next season. I'm going to come back with pieces individually on the top five teams, which alphabetically are Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool, Manchester City, and Manchester United, and well, they'll finish in the coming days. So look for them coming up. See you later.